Okay, who's next?
Jack Venezia.
Your turn.
I'll tell you guys.
Kind of move.
Hello, my name is Jack. I'm going to do a reading for you guys, an excerpt from this book. It's called The Violinist's Thumb. It's all about DNA. And the way I got introduced to this book was my sister bought me another book by the same author called The Disappearing Spoon. It's a lot more famous than this one is. This actually just came out this summer, but The Disappearing Spoon is about the history of the periodic table. And so it's really chemistry jam-packed. And so if you like chemistry, you should read that. And this one, if you like biology, you should read this book. But like I said, all about DNA. And I just literally finished this chapter a couple weeks ago and haven't read any more of the book, but finished it and said, this would be a really cool thing to read at folio. I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but I'm going to skip around a little. I'll ask you guys if you want me to continue. I might spoil things. I don't know if you guys will read the book after I read some of it. So anyway, here we go. This chapter, chapter 3, is called Them's the DNA Breaks. August 6th, 1945. Started off pretty lucky for perhaps the most unlucky man of the 20th century. On a side note, I might slaughter some Japanese pronunciations here. Tutsumu Yamaguchi had stepped off his bus near Mitsubishi headquarters in Hiroshima when he realized he'd forgotten his ink can, the seal that Japanese salarymen dip in red ink to use stamp documents. The lapse annoyed him. He faced a long ride back to his boarding house, but nothing could really dampen his mood that day. He'd finished designing a 5,000-ton tanker ship for Mitsubishi, and the company would finally, the next day, send him back home to his wife and infant son in southwest Japan. The war had disrupted his life, but on August 7th, things would return to normal. As Yamaguchi removed his shoes at his boarding house door, the elderly proprietors ambushed him and asked him to tea. He could hardly refuse these lonely folk, and the unexpected engagement further delayed him. Shot again, ink can in hand, he hurried off, caught a streetcar, disembarked near work, and was walking along a potato field when he heard a gnat of an enemy bomber high above. He could just make out a speck descending from its belly. It was 8:15 a.m. Many survivors remember the curious delay. Instead of a normal bomb's simultaneous flash bang, this bomb flashed, swelled silently, and got hotter and hotter silently. Yamaguchi was close enough to the epicenter that he didn't wait long. Drilled in air tactics, he says dived here. I think dove is grammatically correct. But I even circled it when I read it with a pencil because it kind of irritated me. Anyway, he dived to the ground, covered his eyes, and plugged his ears with his thumbs. After a half-second light bath came a roar, and with it came a shockwave. A moment later, Yamaguchi felt a gale somehow beneath him, raking his stomach. He'd been tossed upward, and after a short flight, he hit the ground unconscious. He awoke perhaps seconds later, perhaps an hour later, to a darkened city. The mushroom cloud had sucked up tons of dirt and ash, and small rings of fire smoked on wilted potato leaves nearby. His skin felt aflame, too. He'd rolled up his shirt sleeves, rose and staggered through the potato field, stopping every few feet to rest. Shuffling past other burned and bleeding and torn open victims, strangely compelled, he reported to Mitsubishi. He found a pile of rubble speckled with small fires and many dead co-workers. He'd been lucky to be late. He'd wandered onward. Hours slipped by, he drank water from broken pipes, and at an emergency aid station, he nibbled on a biscuit and vomited. He slept the night beneath an overturned boat on a beach. His left arm, fully exposed to the great white flash, had turned black. All the while, beneath the incinerated skin, Yamaguchi's DNA was nursing even greater injuries. He starts talking about, the DNA stuff that the book's about. The nuclear bomb at Hiroshima released, among other radioactivity, loads of supercharged X-rays called gamma rays. Like most radioactivity, these rays singled out and selectively damaged DNA. Punching DNA nearby water molecules and making electrons fly out like uppercut teeth. Sudden loss of electrons formed free radicals, highly reactive atoms that chew on chemical bonds. A chain reaction begins that cleaves DNA and sometimes snaps chromosomes into pieces. By the mid-1940s, scientists were starting to grasp why the shattering or disruption of DNA could wreak such ruin inside cells. First, scientists based in New York produced strong evidence that genes were made of DNA. This upended the persistent belief in protein inheritance, which is a theory that he mentioned earlier on that's important. But as a second study revealed, DNA and proteins still shared a special relationship. DNA made proteins, with each DNA gene storing the recipe for one protein, making proteins, in other words, what genes did. That's how genes created traits in the body. In conjunction, these two ideas explain the harm of radioactivity. Fracturing DNA disrupts genes. Disrupting genes halts protein production. Halting protein production kills cells. Scientists didn't work this out instantly. The crucial one gene, one protein paper appeared just days before Hiroshima. But they knew enough to cringe at the thought of nuclear weapons. When Hermann Muller won his Nobel Prize in 1946, he prophesied to the New York Times that if atomic bomb survivors, and then in quotes, could foresee the results 1,000 years from now, they might have considered themselves more fortunate if the bomb had killed them, end quotes. Despite Muller's pessimism, Yamaguchi did want to survive, badly, for his family. He had complicated feelings about the war, opposing it at first, supporting it once underway, and then shading back towards opposition when Japan began to stumble, because he feared the island being overrun by enemies who might harm his wife and son, and then, in parentheses, if so, he contemplated giving them an overdose of sleeping pills to spare them, in parentheses. In the hours after Hiroshima, he yearned to get back to them. So when he heard rumors about trains leaving the city, he sucked up his strength and resolved to find one. Hiroshima is a collection of islands, and Yamaguchi had to cross a river to reach the train station. All the bridges had collapsed or burned, so he steeled himself, also, I don't know if that's supposed to be stole himself, and began crossing at an apocalyptic bridge of corpses, clogging the river, crawling across melted legs and faces. But at an uncrossable gap in the bridge forced him to turn back. Farther upstream, he found a railroad trestle with one steel beam intact, spanning 50 yards. He clambered up, crossed the iron tightrope, and descended. He pushed through the mob at the station and slumped into a train seat. Miraculously, the train pulled out soon after. He was saved. The train would run all night, but he was finally headed home to Nagasaki.
Oof, that's unfortunate.
So then he goes on to talk about like science stuff for a bunch of pages. Talks about some guys who discovered some stuff.
Yeah, some dudes.
Yes, they were called the RNA tie club. They had matching ties that were RNA. That were like little single strand, not like the double helix, but the single helix. Yeah. So there's that. I can continue the story if you guys would like. I can read it. I can summarize it, or I can stop if anyone would like me to and they want to go out and buy this book themselves.
Knock it off.
No.
Summarize.
Summarize it?
Summarize.
Okay.
Stop.
So he gets back to Nagasaki.
No.
He finds his wife and son. They're fine. Then he, after talking with them for a little bit, his wife tells him you should go to Mitsubishi headquarters in Nagasaki and tell him what happened. So he goes there. And as he's all bandaged up and everything, tells his coworkers, bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And his boss says, "Are you kidding me? You're an engineer." He barked, "Calculate it. How could one bomb destroy a whole city?" Famous last words. Just as this Nostradamus wrapped up, a white light swelled inside the room. Heat prickled Yamaguchi's skin, and he hit the deck of the ship engineering office. Against all odds, this guy survives the second atomic bomb. I shit you not. 80,000 people died in Hiroshima, 70,000 more in Nagasaki. Of the hundreds of thousands of surviving victims, evidence suggests that roughly 150 got caught near both cities on both days. And that handful got caught within both blast zones. In that handful, a circle of intense radiation around 1.5 miles wide. Some of these, and then it has this Japanese term, Niyu Hibakusha, or double exposure survivors, had stories that could make stones weep. Of all of these people that died, one person was within 1.5 miles of both explosions and survived, and that's this guy, Tutsumu Yamaguchi. Then he goes and talks about some more science stuff for a bunch of pages. And then finally, at the end, he has a little more uplifting part. Just as a guess, his wife and son survived the Nagasaki explosion. They were in a bunker, which kind of sounds weird because like the bomb already went off at Hiroshima, but like if Philly got nuked yesterday, I would be in a bomb shelter too. So they survived. Just to take guesses, when do you think his wife died?
What?
Shout out guesses. No, do it. She survived.
No radiation.
Yeah, she dies eventually of cancer.
Like,
2008.
Wow.
Guess when he dies?
what?
2010.
He like slip on a banana,
At
something really
93
ironic.
years old of stomach cancer.
Wow.
What's up? Go for it.
Didn't he have more radiation than her?
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
I was
They drink a lot of green
But
tea.
after all this, it's amazing that he survived both explosions, and then to survive, to 93 years old is outrageous. But at the end of the chapter, he kind of has this uplifting thing that says, and there is, dare I say, some small hope in that. Even the most deadly weapons ever developed, ever deployed, weapons that killed tens of thousands at once and attacked and scrambled people's biological essences, their DNA, didn't wipe out a nation. Nor did they poison the next generation. Thousands of children of A-bomb survivors remain alive today, alive and healthy. And that's, yeah. Pretty much. The Violet is sung by Sam King. Look it up, it's a great book.
And another round of applause for Yamaguchi.
Wait, so that dude survived both atomic bombs?
Both atomic bombs. The one person
Asshole! Wow.